Good evening. Thanks for showing up. I want to thank Stephen and Barbara for their gracious hospitality and kindness while we've been house sitting and enjoying that fully. And since Sue and George are here, I can't move forward without thanking them for their graciousness in Santa Fe. We still have things in their closets. I've never been here before. And in my life, I've traveled around the world many, many times. And as you already know, there's something about this place. I haven't tried to figure out what it is. I just acknowledge that. But I have a poem for you. The tenderness of my heart is awakened by the vast night sky. I was numb until stars fell on my head. I was lost in restlessness until they held me in their magical arms. I beheld myself as one of them, finally shining in the dark. My mind's clarity rides gently on the wings of hummingbirds, and I smile. I recognize the voices of prairie dogs and magpies as my own. I am here now, and that's all, entrusting myself to the awakening at hand, like the blessed mountains that surround us, who know no fear. We live in a period of human history and evolution that no one has ever lived in before. We are actually in the midst of the birth of a planetary wisdom culture, as some people call it. And that birth, which has been going on for a while, is threatening to patriarchal patterns in particular. It is threatening to old ways of thinking about everything from the whole universe to our economics and our food. So we are in the cherished position of a Chinese quote, "May you live in interesting times." And every crisis has two parts, danger and opportunity. And so much of our media and news highlights the danger and therefore re-traumatizes us and often reconvinces us this birth is not possible. I want to emphasize for you the opportunity so we don't forget what we are capable of, what is possible for us as practitioners. I was thinking of the woman who adopted me as her grandchild during the meditation. She just showed up. And when I was in the 6th grade in science class, she and my mother had been invited to the school to meet with the principal, and I was called in. I didn't know about any of this. And we went in, and the principal said, he just wrote a paper on the law of probability. Where did he get that idea? And my grandmother looked at me and says, he's always had a problem of being a big thinker. And it may be his only way out of this mess. So Buddhism for me is about the human experience and how we participate in our human experience in ways that reduce our suffering and confusion, and also the suffering and confusion of the world in which we live. If it does not do that, it is not Buddhism. There are other things associated with Buddhism. There's the mindfulness movement going on around the world in professions and in conditions, and I'm familiar with that. I've been certified in all those things. I know how to do all that. But that is the door. It is not the room. And some people are upset about all this mindfulness stuff. I think it's wonderful. Let's open as many doors as we can. However, the purpose of having the door open is so people can enter the room if they wish and take the journey into the deeps of their own healing and transformation, which is at the foundation of the healing and transformation of our society. We live in a period of history in which the economic process has literally become so influential, it defines the very meaning of being a human being. We evaluate ourselves that way, we evaluate one another that way, we evaluate societies that way. When I met children, we spent 3 years working in Bangkok at a school that wanted to become the mindfulness leader in education in Thailand, which it has done, thanks to their hard work and a little bit of our help. But when I met children who had daytimers that were more organized than my own, and schedules that were burning them out, and parents that wanted to make sure they got in the right preschool, so they would get in the right university, so they would make enough money, something's wrong. We are destroying our goodness. And it's one of the things I learned during the civil rights movement and hearing talks and dialogues around Martin Luther King. You must always remember, however hard you're working, there's somebody working in the opposite direction because many of them don't know any better. It's not about blame. It's not about judgment. It's about clarity. And our practice is about clarity. Wisdom is a verb. Compassion is a verb. And our political processes worldwide serve the economic. This complete ally to the economic processes. Bow down and serve economics. And then the economics serve back by equipping all of our political systems with the weapons they need to stay in touch with their notions of power. And what's happened in all this in the last 500-600 years, now you go back to the Middle Ages, I have a different pattern. But the cultural dimension of our lives has collapsed. What I mean is, the value of being a human being is less and less. Education is undervalued. Community is undervalued. Mythology, undervalued. Art, undervalued. This is my newest journal from Frida Kahlo, who every time we teach in Mexico, which we do several times in over a year, I always visit. She was the person who taught me that art is a spiritual practice. We spent a whole morning at her house a few years ago. I had been there before it was all open 30 years ago. And now the whole house is open. And you can walk through and see her studio, and you can see her deathbed and her mask and great documentaries. You know, the week before she passed away, she was carried to a protest march, protesting the CIA's involvement in Nicaragua. Artist. No wonder people were scared of him. Music, dance. These are the keys to changing this pattern, because the political and the economic cannot block spirit. I feel the land here. I feel it walking around. I can feel the energy of people who've gone before us. So I am not confused that I'm in touch with ancestors from many places and many people whose tears and genius and talent make us sitting here possible. So the cultural dimension of our life is the key to rebalancing our society. So if you're a teacher, teach on. Work with your children, your students. If you're an artist, Keep it up if you're a musician. Keep it up. Do not surrender your goodness, your genius, and your imagination to someone who doesn't think very much of being a human being, except as a summary of what can be accumulated. How do I practice with this? Big thinking pause. This is where I find my study and practice continually of Buddhism very helpful. First of all, I thought of a phrase from a book actually by Paul Tillich, a Christian theologian in the early 50s, who was quite influential in the ecumenical movement. He wrote a book called The Courage to Be. I think that's all I'm really trying to say to you. We must continue to nourish in ourselves the courage to be ourselves. And as Thich Nhat Hanh likes to say, be beautiful, be yourself. And as someone else said in a joke, every other person's already taken. And if you're not being yourself, who could you possibly be? David Wyeth had a great poem that in dialogue with some work of Mary Oliver, he was referring to the sad thing about, we had a friend who just passed away last week, a Sangha member and student from Oklahoma, early onset of Alzheimer's. His wife, we've been on the phone and we've been at the house and leading meditations and practicing with him over the last several years as his body started to disintegrate. And his wife called us and confirmed that he had passed a few days ago. And he never complained. I find that stunning. He never complained about his pain, his difficulty. It was excruciating just to be with him, because his body became more and more like a pretzel. And yet, he did not surrender his goodness. This is how we must practice with one another, with ourselves. A few months ago, we led a retreat in Indianola, in Washington State, and the title was Crossing the Mercy Bridge. In Kyoto, there's a temple with 1001 Avalokiteshvaras, bodhisattvas of compassion. And it's a powerful place to visit. And of course, if you've seen some of these statues and images in Buddhism, these bodhisattvas are all gigantic. And they are gigantic to remind us of how big we can be. In 1969, I was at the National Council of Churches gathering in Detroit. And some of the people from my organization I was a part of tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Stop everything. Rosa Parks is coming this way, and we want to give you a chance to meet her." So I'm, Rosa Parks, oh my God! Now look at this giant, she's really tiny. And sweet. And fierce. Fierceness doesn't mean we're not sweet. Fierceness means we're not confused. And she was a woman who was not confused. And yet she retained her sweetness, her kindness, and her clarity. A bodhisattva, that may be a new term for you. Bodhi in Sanskrit means awake. Sattva means person. An awake person. And you can get more academic with it, but I won't bother you with that. An awake person. Last year we were looking, we've been on this quest to find our home for a long time, where to live. And not just the place, but a sanctuary. A great article that Kim shared with me today that helped talk about the difference between a location and the feeling in a location. So we were in San Miguel Allende and researching there. We had a chance to have an art class, and we got a call from our person who trained us in trauma resiliency work. And she said, I've just been invited to Mexico City to work with psychologists there to help respond to the earthquake that just happened in December. And somehow I knew you were in Mexico. So why don't you take 10 days and volunteer and come help out? So of course, we did. And at the end of this, great young people working with homeless kids, we worked and we went to the neighborhoods that were most damaged by the earthquake. We visited families. We did live therapy in the moment. And at the end, the young woman who organized all this, I said, have you ever heard the word bodhisattva? She says, no. I said, it's a person who cares. And a person who cares enough to care for others. And she said, well, that's me. The world is full of bodhisattvas who do not know who they are. And therefore they feel isolated, alone, disconnected, dispirited. My task in whatever energy I have left in this world is to change that pattern. So that bodhisattvas get to know there are many of us. In the Jewish tradition, there's a great story about the righteous. And that in every period of history and in every community, there's a group of people who are the righteous that are invisible to most people. But if they did not do what they did, society would completely collapse. This is how we must understand ourselves. We must understand ourselves deeper than political categories. And politics is important. We must be vigilant. And we must be clear. But we must not let that define our souls. Because when we touch our souls, when we touch that energy, it's larger than the entire social process. This is why when Thich Nhat Hanh was so heartbroken when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and we were there when he told us this in person, he had to do walking meditation all night. And one of the questions in all of his walking was, will he ever come back to a place that would do that to a bodhisattva? Would he ever return to the United States? And eventually, and thankfully, he did. A bodhisattva has a path. A bodhisattva is a person who makes a vow to heal and transform their own suffering, their own pain, their own agony, their own rage, so it does not spill out into history. And that sounds like a big term, but I'm talking about spilling out at the kitchen table. I'm talking about the classroom. I'm talking about on the streets and in the parking lots where we interact with one another, and in the world and in meetings where decisions are made to shape lives. So often we're just replaying our own trauma. So the first vow of a bodhisattva is to take care of myself so I don't hurt you. The second vow of a bodhisattva is to do everything I can to nourish the bodhisattva qualities in others. To highlight that, to recognize that, to celebrate that, to call that out, to call that forth, and to support that. Whether it is in children, every age, we teach all over the world, and bodhisattvas are thankfully everywhere. And the third vow of a bodhisattva is, if we live 1,000 years, we'll come back and do it over again. That's unlimited commitment. You know, we have these phones that say we have unlimited. Don't believe it. That's not unlimited. That's counted and charged, which is fine. Just don't be confused. What we're talking about now is unlimited. And we must learn to live with the quality of consciousness that touches this part of our awareness all the time. And as we do, it will radiate outward. A great term in Buddhism is called the field of merit. Field of goodness is what that means. And to me, what a community of practice like you have here, it's what happens is your own energy, even when you leave this place, leaves behind energy of goodness, leaves behind energy of merit. And there are places in the world, and you may have been to some of these places, where if you walk into those places, you start to get transformed without even trying to. Go to St. Clair's Chapel in Assisi. Do walking meditation there for 3 minutes. You'll be transformed because she's still teaching. The Buddha is still teaching. Jesus is still teaching. Just don't be confused. Meet them face to face, heart to heart, energy to energy. Because that energy is our energy. We are not these tiny little things walking around, as Gregory Bateson once said, dragging around a bag of bones with an exhausted ego. We don't have to live like that. And a bodhisattva works in 3 ways. One is geographically. A bodhisattva picks a place and becomes the king or queen of their own territory, as Thich Nhat Hanh likes to say. When Ty was training us in how to answer the phone mindfully, his favorite illustration is when your phone rings, don't jump up like a monkey. Take a breath and walk to your phone like a lioness or a lion. Calm and stable. Just try that for a week. See what happens. I had a friend who's still a great friend. His phone runs his life. And as we all know, half the calls aren't even real. They're artificial intelligence reaching out to sell you stuff. Your own territory, your own heart, your own mind, that's what the practice is about. So that stability and calm is the foundation from which wisdom can flow. Secondly, a bodhisattva can be a shepherd. A bodhisattva can be a person who cares for a group of people, whether that's in the working environment, or at home, or in the family, or in the community. A bodhisattva cares for sheep. So none are lost. None are forgotten. It's one of the things I enjoyed about working at the school with children. We had 1,000 children from 44 nationalities. We worked with for 3 years. And no one had taught these children they should not get along. So they did. It was incredible. And every year we had a great feast where everybody from all 44 countries brought food. Oh, it's so good. Just ate my way around the world. And people always want you to have more. Everybody came in their cultural dress from all over the planet, all the languages, all the colors, all the sounds, all the voices, all the smiles. You can see what's possible. So, a part of what a bodhisattva's work is to make sure you stay in touch with that which inspires you. That which allows you to see what's possible. And in our case, and in this country, we have to look hard, or we'll miss it. Or we'll be swayed into believing there's no goodness left in us. not true. Now, there are people who need serious help. There are people who need therapy or some serious time alone away from the rest of us. But that's not most of us. And we've been brainwashed to believe we're that. That's 2% of the population. And the other 98% believe we're the 2%, so we are horrified and scared of one another. And we've never even met. This is the power of images and stories and narratives. So to practice is to stay awake to what is the narrative being handed to me. What is the narrative I am releasing? Putting my trust in, putting my faith in, my energy in, and does that narrative reflect what I know and what I have experienced about my own goodness? I was adopted when I was 8 months old. And when I first got acquainted with the bodhisattvas, the bodhisattva companion, Ty leaned over to me and said, "You understand this?" "Oh, I understand this completely. I know her. It's my mother," who picked me out of a hospital room when I was 8 months old. Compassion is not a noun. It's a verb. And you can look through your whole life and you will find bodhisattvas through your whole life. They have been there, helping you, guiding you, and supporting you. The great task now is to train as many bodhisattvas as possible in the deeper and deeper levels of their own practice so they cannot be moved. I think I'm an old gospel song here, and will not be moved. Stability. Our crisis is not just social, it is social spiritual. And as long as we keep that in our hearts and minds, we can understand the way through this. The last task of a bodhisattva is to run a ferry boat. We lived on Vashon Island, outside of Seattle. We lived on Whidbey Island, and we couldn't go anywhere without catching a ferry. And one of the great works of a bodhisattva is to construct a ferry boat. For anyone who wants to take the journey from simply being caught in the language of this world, in the experience of this world, into the depths of being a human being, into what Thich Nhat Hanh in Buddhism refers to as the ultimate dimension, that we run that boat. And anybody can get on board. One year I was thinking, you know that Old Testament story about Noah? We need an ark, people. We do. And that's what we're constructing. We just don't know it. We are constructing an ark that is based on wisdom from the whole planet, from all of our ancestors. Whoever they are, there is wisdom everywhere, but we have cut off pieces of it, isolated other pieces of it, commodified other pieces of it. We are building this very moment. Now what's important to remember, for me, is whatever we construct will definitely be an improvement. But we must remember that if we come back 1,000 years from now, they will still have to do it again. So it's not about being superior. It's about being grounded in the nature of things. To take the journey of cultivating your heart. And remember, in Buddhism and in Asian structure and language, heart and mind are one. There's not two different things there. And also, you know from your own practice, especially if you're a yogini, heart, mind, and body are one. You cannot separate these things. People have been tried in science to do this for a while. And the conclusion, the language for it is the problem. It simply means we cannot dissect everything into clarity. Heart, body, I'm all one. How wonderful that is so. So the word for this kind of cultivation of the heart in Buddhism is called bodhicitta. It's called cultivating the mind of love. This is the practice. And love is love that is loving kindness in action, compassion in action, shared joy in action, and equanimity, letting go in action. And so for me, I want to encourage myself. I am practicing with continuing to cultivate an open heart, which I call the wakeful heart, a reflective heart, a heart that's willing to look deep into things and not live on the surface. You know, in the 7 factors of awakening, mindfulness is the first factor, and mindfulness here means living non-superficiality. And when Mark's wife, Carol, called us on the phone and said Mark has passed, I was prepared to hear that. What I was not prepared to hear was that he donated his brain to science because of Alzheimer's, and it was already in the mail to UCLA Medical Center. And that rocked my world. Living a non-superficial life means not forgetting how precious life is. How temporary this arrangement is. One of my theology professors used to say, please remember everything is on loan. Whether you know you took out a loan or not. Everything's impermanent. Always changing. Never able to hold on to finally. Live non-superficiality. And then when you look at the flowers and the trees and the magpies and your children and grandchildren and your beloved ones and the mess, the hot mess of the United States right now, look at it, see it clearly, and practice creating enough space in yourself to hold it all. And because when I can do that, it is transformed. Not just me, the space itself is transformed. In the teachings of Buddhist psychology, every seed in our consciousness, every impulse in our consciousness, every tendency in our consciousness is both individual and collective. And this is why, because I am more peaceful, the world's more peaceful. I like that because it means whether somebody wanted to be more peaceful or not, they are. Because I am. We must understand our powers energetically this way. We were with Tai in China one time, and he was giving a talk at the 1500th year anniversary of Namwa Temple. And there was quite a few of us doing walking meditation to the temple. And Tai liked to show off Westerners. Because he's like, okay, you see these Westerners, they're taking this tradition seriously. What are you doing? No, I understand their strategy. And so we're walking, so he had Peggy and I near up the front, right? And so we're getting ready to walk in. He turns around, he says, Master Empty Cloud out here. Study him. And then he went on in to give his talk and presentation. So after that, I went to the bookstore, crawling around on the floor, and I found one book of Master Empty Cloud, which I then have found another one in Hong Kong somewhere. And one of his great teachings is if you're looking for the Buddha outside of yourself, I have really bad news for you. There is no Buddha outside of you. There is no bodhisattva outside of you. All those bodhisattvas, Samantabhadra of Great Action, which for me is Rosa Parks incarnate, the bodhisattva of aspiration The great aspiration, the bodhisattva, and there's so many bodhisattvas. We started doing schools on each one that are really fun and quite a learning environment. The bodhisattva, a great understanding. The bodhisattva who marches into hell for a heavenly cause. The bodhisattva everyone is glad to see. When I came across this, I was like, oh wow. Boy, I gotta practice a lot to become that one, to release that quality. But all these qualities are in us. Our practice is to release these qualities, nourish these qualities like we go to the gym and work out, so that they become embodied in our daily life, in our thinking, in our speaking, in our behavior. The inspiring aspect. Stay inspired. Figure out what inspires you, and every day find a way to touch that and be touched by that. Because again, you can be disinspired in a second. Just read the news. Turn on the TV. And cultivate in yourself safety. The energy of safety. So that anyone who comes around you and near you experiences safety. Oh boy, what a gift. And as we embody and practice with these qualities, we become radiant. Our own field of merit, our own energy of goodness, it takes on a bright quality and shines outward. And it can shine in every direction. And it can shine forever. I do want to make one more connection with two more things I was saying that there's not time to go into. But it is important to understand how this is based in our evolutionary neurological conditioning. If we do not understand our nervous system, we will not get out of this mess. So, if you like study and reading, if you haven't already, start to acquaint yourself with evolutionary psychology. It'll take you all the way back, thousands and thousands of years, to the two different chimps whose lineages we represent. One group, patriarchal, top down, mean. The other group, party animals. Basic, I'm doing a stereotype, right? But not far off. Do your own research. I always do my own research. And we're still dealing with this lineage of our evolutionary heritage. And so why I became interested in how meditation affects the brain is because the research shows that we can rewire our evolutionary neurological heritage. And this is why mindfulness is not just cute or interesting or about being well, though all those are important. It is about deeply transforming our evolutionary trajectory. That's why I'm involved in it. And that grounding is, for me, the inner work of social justice. If we do not rewire ourselves neurologically, rewire our minds, justice is not possible, because even when we experience justice, we would not recognize it. And now we're so confused, you can almost tell us anything. But we don't have to be. Every gene in you is smart, or you'd have never survived to make it this far. Let's honor that. Let's respect that in our ancestors and in ourselves. And I wanted to end on time because I know this is important for adults especially.
End on time. And we're close, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.